Welcome everybody to Rebelcast episode 6. Y'all, I'm going to be messed up about the numbers for a long time just because of that one lost episode. But yeah, episode 6, not 7. And it's been a week. It's been a week since MTG Aftermath that we got to, really play with it, test it, talk about it, use it. So we'll get to that. But today I wanted to cover just 3 broad topics. The first of which being the most recent Wizards Discord Q&A. Recap, credit to Fire Shoes, by the way. I mean, what doesn't that guy retweet that isn't important to us? Much love to Fire Shoes, Robert Taylor. But yeah, posted up a lot of the screenshots from that. So we're going to talk about a couple of items from that. And we're also going to discuss the meta, of course, after Aftermath for Standard, with some notes from Explorer, I'm sure. And then talk about really our review of the set, because we did kind of a preview, and then we kind of talked about what we were really excited the last time. Boy, that was a different world. We had youth in our eyes, wonder in our eyes last week, talking about all the different cards we were excited about. And then now I think some of us at least feel pretty much a 180. So we'll get to all that. How is everybody doing? We have with us today John Ramos, MTG. How are you, sir?
Awesome. Off of this crazy schedule for the last 2 weeks, so excited to get back to actually playing. Hope y'all happy Mother's Day to all the mamas out there.
Yes, yes. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everyone out there that is a mother or takes care of, younglings. There are certainly a lot of ways to do that. We have with us today Darth Rictus of the Dark Stream. How are you, good sir?
I'm good. You know how you don't take care of younglings? You leave them in a Jedi temple. That is how you don't take care of younglings.
Too soon.
Too soon? Okay.
Might be too soon.
I mean, is it really too soon though? I mean,
Yeah, if you're
really,
with the culture, it's not. Everybody knows what we're talking about. How are you though? How are you doing? How's your Magic play been?
Oh man, I have been trekking up the ladder with Abzan Legends trying to prove a point because, everybody after the Pro Tour, I mean like everybody went and adopted either the Nathan Stoyer, however you pronounce it, never found out. His Rakdos Burn mid-range list that took down the Pro Tour, it's very strong. It's very difficult to beat, and as such, most people are adapting that. Or weirdly, I keep seeing my literal list from the pizza box open over and over again on the ladder where people are boarding in, and I think they watch the sideboard guides, which is a bit of a bummer when I'm getting beat by my own sideboard strategy.
Your own
Like,
ideas at work. I love it though.
I mean, it's nice to be proven right, but not like this, man. Not like this. So
Never something you had to
anyway,
consider as a content creator was fighting against your own strategies. I love it.
no, I didn't know that many people paid attention, but like, god damn it, they keep doing the exact sideboard things that I would have preached in the exact instance. And I'm like, well done, damn it. So we shifted over to Abzan Legends, and that's kind of where we're messing with things right now. I think I'm sitting at 11-2 with this on the ladder, almost all the way back up into Mythic, and it's a beast. I think the piece that a lot of people have missed in how they're building it is that they are pushing into like all the 4-drops. I keep seeing iterations with 4 Shieldred and 4 Thalia, the Gitrog monster. I'm just gonna say off the cuff, I think it's wrong. 4 Shieldred is correct. That is the whole reason to play any Legends deck, is that you top out at Shieldred, and Shieldred ends the game if you protect it.
Love the nuance here because, like the other Legends decks, it's very important to get your numbers right, specifically for the
Yeah.
different matchups. Stoyer, never. I remember Stoyer being the right pronunciation because of the article that came out recently about him, never-ending Stoyer.
Right.
But I mean, why wouldn't people copy that deck? And that's what we expect, and we'll get to that as well. We have with us also Lieutenant Watts. Lieutenant Watts, you're actually on time today, so kudos to you, sir. I know you work hard on the weekends, so thank you for being here. Glad to have you. How are you?
I am well. I'm well. Been playing around with some of the new aftermath cards, kicking around with a deck that's predicated around casting cards from exile. So lots of different triggers in there. A lot of fun, but we can talk about that later. But I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. And yeah, I'll definitely want you to bring that up when we get to that because I think a couple of decks are back. Um, they got some new cards. That's all I'll say for now. Not to steal our own thunder later. Luis Dragon, how are you, sir? Happy Mother's Day to you and your mother and everything going on with your family. I wish you the best. How are you?
Hey, hello, Max. How are you? Thanks for the support. I'm doing right. For the moment, I'm doing great. I gonna play a lot of
Talking.
arena this time. Hmm?
Okay, cool, cool, cool. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, so let's get right into business. The very first thing I want to talk about is this, and I'm going to go ahead and cast this up.
While he's figuring it out, Darkstream, I feel the pain because the last time I top aided a big event, a lot of people in Mythic were using a list that I top aided with, and they're like, "Man, this deck sucks." I was like, "I told y'all not to play it. I even said it in my Twitter feed. Don't play it. It's not good." I just got really lucky.
But some people just look at the results, and that does happen.
Yeah. All right, I think I
so-
got it.
Okay. Cool.
All right, here we go. So this is just basically the Discord Q&A thread reposted by Fire Shoes, and I really just want to look at the first two. We can kind of glance at the other ones if we have time. But on this first one here, this was a Wizards Discord Q&A recap, and regarding banned and restricted announcements and how things are about to go down. We have this Watsy employee regarding that saying, "This is a complicated topic. We are currently still in developing our philosophy around bannings. One of our main goals for this new system is to make Standard more accessible for more players. I can say that we will ensure that banning events will not be on a less predictable cadence. We plan to have set dates ahead of time so that players don't feel like they have had the rug pulled under them. This Tuesday, I'll be going over much more of the banning philosophy with Blake and Huey on weekly MTG." And then, yeah, so let's talk about this first piece here. Personally, I'm on the fence when it comes to bannings. I guess the majority opinion would say I'm more conservative when it comes to this. I think they're a last resort. I think you really need to let the community find the solution before you go to a ban. And that's really pertinent today when in the era of arena and digital play, you have thousands and thousands of games. You have large sample size to draw from. So the community is going to come up with a solution pretty quickly. That's how I see it. How do you guys see it? I want to start with John Ramos. What do you think about this? And how do you see the ban philosophy changing? What's your prediction there?
So, as a MTG boomer, much like Darkstream, we came up in a time where bans were a very, very last resort, and information is not what it. Information back then was not what it is today. In that deck lists are much more tuned, easier to access because you have a hive mind with the internet. So it's easier for Standard to be quote unquote solved, or any other format for that matter. Um, the philosophy I don't think is going to change. And with the announcement that rotations are going to be every 3 years instead of every 2, I made the prediction that bans are going to be less likely because the card pool is going to get bigger. So that means that with a bigger card pool, there's going to be more or easier, or I don't want to say easier, but more ways to deal with stuff. So, for example, Shieldred will still be here, but you always have stuff to use, and new cards are coming in. So my prediction is that the philosophy is not going to change in the way it is already. In fact, it might even change to the point where, yeah, they're going to do what they used to do, which is every 3 months or every 2 months or however many days they want to put forth, how they're going to put forth a day or their cadence or whatnot. Because it's been a little bit, it's not as, their cadence right now is less. So it's going to be more cadence of, hey, ban and restricted announcements or whatever. and it's probably going to be less because the card pools are bigger. So, whatever. I'm all for it, by the way.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess you guys. I'm not going to assume Darkstream's thoughts. We're going to ask here in just a second, but yeah, being veteran players, I consider myself a veteran player as well, just because I played so long ago. But there was a large gap where I was not playing Magic, so I missed out on like the early 2010s when Modern became a thing and all the pre-bannings that went into that and that whole saga and that whole episode. But you guys can tell me about that. Darkstream, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I look at it as, are we doing bans because there's a broken dynamic, or are we doing bans because we don't like the dynamic and we want a dynamic shift? Because I think this is a distinction that needs to be made. There are dynamics such as Affinity, where it was broken. Like, there was no other deck that was even viable in the meta for a very long time when that was in standard. But then there are dynamic shifts where the community is just tired of seeing the same card come down on 3 and 4 because they're just tired of it and they don't want to brew around it. They don't want to try to build around it. They just want the engines gone so that they can try out other ideas. And I'm not saying there isn't merit to the second one, but like Ramos said, we came up in a time when it was just the first. Like, it had to be a truly broken dynamic for Wizards to say no.
That may be. Thank you for putting that into such good words, because I couldn't say that the other day when I was having this argument online. That may be exactly what the disconnect is coming up in a time where this really was kind of a last resort thing, and that's the philosophy that we're used to, versus today where it's more about the second one, where it's more about diversifying things, new archetypes, different archetypes reviving or coming back, new decks. Nobody wants to play with the same deck for like longer than a month, it seems. So, yeah, there's definitely like some kind of generational disconnect, but also a disconnect in the time that you came up playing Magic and what you expect from the game. I want to ask Lieutenant Watts now about this because, right, different setting, playing primarily on Arena right now, but Lieutenant Watts has a little bit of history with Paper. So, talk to me, Lieutenant Watts. What's your take here?
Uh, I'm actually really excited for us to have a extended standard. I do hope that it becomes a situation like Dark said, where they ban based on this is just flat out broken, and it, like once this is in play, there's just no point in playing anymore. Um, and they keep it that way. What I'm really afraid of, though, is Wizards pandering to fanboys and a bunch of people complaining about a specific card, and that's what ends up getting it banned. Not necessarily because it breaks a mechanic or it just makes it, unplayable, but just because they don't want to play against it.
So yeah, I can definitely see. So we all kind of see what's going on with the popular opinion, right? That we should be just a little bit more liberal with the bans. Uh, Luis, do you share that opinion as well? And if you do or if you don't, I want to ask a further question. I can ask it of the whole group after you give your response. Is what cards warrant that sort of last resort ban right now, if any? Luis, go ahead.
Um, uh, for banning, I think it's difficult. I don't have seen like very broken card to be a great problem. But with the new extended period of standard, mm, I suppose they can do something like, I mean, other games like limit the card, so we don't have four of that card, or we can only have two in a deck. I mean, I think it's a thing in Bin. I
Yeah,
don't know if I'm
restricting
right.
versus banning, right?
Yeah, I think it will be a lot better to just restrict the quantity of the cards. If they are not broken, but they are giving you a problem, or they are being too used. And what was the other question?
Yeah,
Like
and
which card?
yeah, are there any cards right now in this standard that warrant that kind of ban?
The thing is that, for example, Mirror of Ikijiki lets you play anything with red because you're making um, treasures, and you can. It's an integral part of reanimation decks that are playing a lot right now. So I don't see a lot. I don't see that that's a extremely problematic card because you can kill the Goblin token the turn they came in, but it's one of the most used cards that I think that could be a problem. And the other one that I think, and personally, I do like it. I think it's a very good card. Is Invoke Despair. The thing, my problem with Invoke Despair, like I have always said, is not that it's super broken, but when a player is in a bad position and and the opponent plays Invoke Despair, there's no way going out. Maybe you can play your the creature that you need or the planeswalker that it's gonna save you, and the opponent has Invoke Despair and it kills you. My great problem with Invoke Despair is the drawing card part. I think that it makes it very overpowered because you can play it every time and every time it has value. And it's very easy to play it with the current mana setup that we have with any deck that plays black and every other color. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And before I open it up, uh, I could see. I was thinking about it when you were talking about Fable the Mirror Breaker because that's been so many conversations now. But I could see them if they were really smart about alchemy, making a version of Fable the Mirror Breaker where the goblin only gets you like one treasure token, for example, or making an adjustment like that and testing that out. But we've had that conversation about them not using bans effectively in alchemy or changing it up digitally. Um, what do you? All right, guys, what do you think? Are there cards right now like Invoke Despair or Fable? Do they warrant a ban? Darkstream, let's go.
No,
John Ramos is like no. Darkstream.
no.
Honestly, I don't think that there needs to be a ban. I think a ban here is something that would be done to please the community and not because it fundamentally would alter. Like it doesn't need to happen in order for standard to be playable. There's more than 4 tier 1 archetypes. The Rakdos deck that Stoyer won with, I briefly was talking about that versus like Abzan Legends. There are niche decks that you can build that can finagle their way past 2 out of 3 games. It's just a question of putting in the time and the effort. And I don't think that we need to ban them yet. I think it's premature, but if we're going to ban, I want to ban like 6 cards because if we're banning for dynamic shift, I want Fable out, I want Wedding Announcement out, I want Shieldred, I want Invoke, I want Reckoner Bankbuster, I want Adeline. Like I want all of the engine cards gone so that we have to completely restructure what we're doing in standard, or else any band that's below that 6 or at least that first 5 feels like it's too little for a dynamic shift. Then you're just moving which deck is tier 1 by like 1 slot. Like all of a sudden white mid-range becomes huge because it has Wedding Announcement and Fable's gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's something people aren't considering, is that one deck shift might just mean that, now we have another version of Grixis in play. And that's not exactly diversifying things. Lieutenant Watts, I
Right.
think, did you want to say something on this?
No, I just realized that I was live, Mike.
Oh, okay.
I've
Well,
already said my piece on this because like I'm in the same camp of you get rid of all of the engines or you get rid of none of them.
I think that's a good point.
I don't agree. I don't agree with any of this. But which look, Darkstream can attest to this because he's been playing basically the same amount of time I have. So we have a historical reference to how bands were treated in the past. So when you say ban, and I've said this before when they were banning cards like left and right beforehand, when you say ban, you're talking about cards like I start comparing them. Is Fable the Mirror Breaker Oko? Is Fable Jace the Mind Sculptor or any of the affinity cards or Memory Jar, or these are all
Right.
cards that were in standard.
Okay,
So
yeah, right. But hold on. But isn't the question really, do they affect standard the same way that those cards affected standard when they were in print? Because I mean, no, he's not. It's not Jace the Mind Sculptor, but does it affect standard the same way that Jace the Mind Sculptor did?
but the point that I'm trying to make is that these cards didn't just warp formats. They did stuff that, like, I don't know how to say this without like the majority of the time that cards were banned, it was like you're not playing everything else because you're not playing anything else because, like, for example, Oko was so warping at the tune of 70% of the format that you're playing main deck answers to literally Oko to play main deck answers to the main deck answers to Oko. Like, that's how bad it was. And the same with energy and many other, like, cards of that nature. No, these cards are not Oko or any of that. But the point being is, like, yeah, Fable is ubiquitous, but it's not like one of those things where you're like, I don't want to say like warping the format, but not every deck that has a high win rate is playing Fable. When the cards got banned, literally every deck was playing Oko. Literally every deck was playing Jace. Literally every deck was playing the cards. Not every deck in the format is doing so. And my argument for not banning stuff is, since we're not rotating anything, which they did admit, to be fair, that they are not doing this. They didn't design any of the cards that were supposed to rotate this next. They didn't design that with Wilds of Eldraine in mind either. So what I want to see, because Wilds or Eldraine has adventure cards, so every color might get a 2-for-1. So I want to see how these work with the other cards that are supposed to have been rotated, and see how they work with standard, because that's how I want to see how they're going to do this, because they didn't do this with Fable and Children and all the other cards that were supposed to rotate here. But I don't want to see anything banned yet. I just want to see what the next set is, and I'm pretty sure like the next set's supposed to be here like in 6 months. September, I think, is the next set. Wilds supposed to be in September.
Yeah, they're giving us
October,
a ton of
whatever.
time, and I'm very happy about that, by the way. But here's another relevant quote. This one from Aaron. Somebody asked the question, were the next sets Eldraine, Ixalan designed with a 3-year standard in mind? And the answer is obviously no, not exactly, but I don't anticipate that being a problem. Once we realized we wanted to make this change, we figured a little uncertainty on how the next year's sets would mesh with Mid and Val year was worth it, as opposed to waiting another year to make the change. We're always thinking about formats larger than standard as we put card sets together, so we don't anticipate problematic interactions between those 2 years' cards, and our process now is fully up to speed developing for a 3-year format. So they claim that it's going to be fine. That being said, bans are coming. And so when we get to, and in a second we're going to take a look at the meta according to MTG Assistant, and then talk about our experiences with the meta as well, because that data is important too. But we're going to see how many of those decks actually do carry Fable, Invoke, Sheldred. We'll take a look and see. Did anybody else want to comment on this, especially when it comes to the new 3-year cycle and how it affects bans?
I really don't feel the need to ban something at the moment, but my only concern is that how are we going? How is our Wizards of the Coast planning to maintain the standards, the standard rotation available without printing overpowered cards? I don't know if banning is the correct situation, or we can start. I mean, if we can change the gears, we can add restrictions to certain cards, like as I already said. But I do feel like the meta right now is, although it's all with red or black, it's fun. It's not so horrible like when last year we had, like, for example, it's not such a divisive card like Oko, but the it was sorcery, the Calhoun sorcery, the extra turn with the clock,
Alrun's Epiphany.
Orange Epiphany. For example, that's when I felt like standard was really stale because everyone was playing that Orange Epiphany, and it was really boring. When they take you 3 turns out of you or 4 turns out of you, I think that's the kind of the cards that the Wizards of the Coast has to stop printing, like third turns and things like that, on my opinion.
I hear you. Darkstream. here's a litmus test question for you. Was that
Okay.
ban Alrun's Epiphany warranted? And even further, were the modern pre-format bans warranted?
Modern pre-format bans. You're gonna have to remind me what those were.
I don't have a list on hand, but just like where they banned cards preemptively when they made the format, like these cards are banned day one. Like, is that a warranted move when you're constructing a format?
I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan. I usually think that if you're going to develop a format, you're going to create a format. Look what they did with Pioneer with Explorer. I don't think they needed much in the way of preemptive bans. I mean, pretty quickly there were cards that came out and they were abused, but they gave everything a fair shot and they tried to design, I think, with that in mind, that format. So when we get to things like the Outrun's Epiphany ban, I played that standard. It was getting very monotonous. You know, like again, I think the bans get warranted when you get to the point where there's either only one deck or only two decks. And as long as there's rock, paper, scissors, I don't really think there needs to be a ban typically. But if you get into a scenario where there's even just two decks, you know, like the best deck and the deck that beats the best deck, and that's it. That's a very monotonous format. And that's where I start looking at bans. But I don't think we're there in standard for reference.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering how you felt about that, in reference to how you felt about just the current ban environment and philosophy. And just a last note on this Discord Q&A is this comment when talking about we were talking about Legends deck just today, but there are more Legends decks now, and expect that to be even more of a thing. In my prediction is it will be more of a thing as more commander friendly cards get printed into standard sets. But this question kind of goes alongside of that. Is, are they going to incentivize 3-color rare piles, right? And pertinent to that is also them becoming 5-color rare piles. But the response was, this is something we think about, and they're releasing cards to disincentivize that. The cards they point to are in white. They're lay down arms, ossification, so like really cheap, easy ways to remove something that is a multicolor, hard to cast legendary spell, supposedly. Do you think these things are well balanced, or is this just like a promise? I don't see it in the design philosophy currently as much, because we're seeing more Legends decks.
That's a cop out answer, but whatever.
What do you mean?
When
I mean, look at the 5-color ramp deck. Like, are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
they're playing ossification and many other forms. Others were doing the lay down arm stuff with 8 triomes. Like, come on, man. Like, you're not thinking about it that hard because the decks are incentivized to do so.
I hear you.
I know the basic land for ossification is a thing, but the 5-color ramp deck plays more basics than some other 2-3 color decks. Like, come on, man. Seriously.
Yeah, nobody's playing mono white right now, and that was the deck with all the field of destruction field, whatever. Darkstream, what were you gonna say?
So I look at this, and I think it's not even necessarily that it's a cop-out answer so much as it's looking at the problem incorrectly. They're looking at this and saying, well, look, we're going to give incentives to be in one color, monocolor, by doing things like lay down arms and ossification. But what they've done is they've given cheap answers, and that gets rid of aggro decks. It doesn't disincentivize tricolor decks because, in fact, it incentivizes them because you need ETB effects, you need powerful effects to get around how cheap these answers are and how efficient they are. And so what you've done is you've essentially given the wrong incentives. You've incentivized people to go into 3 or more colors to find heavy hitters, and you've also incentivized everybody to play not fucking aggro because now there's all of these cheap, I mean, like Swords to Plowshares basically, and then the best O-ring printed in a long time in white. That's way too much for white to get in terms of, you know what I mean? Like they've never had that in standard since literally Swords to Plowshares. That's way too good.
Yeah, I've heard that comparison a lot. I want to transition now into this discussion into the discussion about the current standard meta and what it's shaped up to be in the last week. And I'm using. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so 2 things real quick. I wanted to address Louis Dragon's the restriction thing. This actually has historical reference. So you're never gonna see restriction. They've actually WotC actually put this out a while ago. I don't remember, I don't have the article at hand, but basically Vintage is the only format that you're gonna see restriction, because restriction is, I don't know what the phrase was that they used, but basically the reason restriction is still a thing on paper is because Vintage is the only format that allows you to play every card in Magic's history. And that is why restriction still exists, is because it disincentivizes them to allow any card banned in Vintage that you're not allowed to play. So, for example, they will restrict a card before they ban it because Vintage is supposed to be this format that you're allowed to play with every card, sans, ante, and all that. So you're never going to see it anywhere else. That's why nothing gets restricted in any other format but Vintage.
Thanks
And
for.
then, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying thanks for the explanation. I never knew that or understood that.
Yeah. And then I had something else and I lost it. So go ahead. If I think about it, I'll say it. But
All right, good enough. Good enough.
I mean, for example, to either reiterate the question that you did before, that, for example, they add for mono white this lead out the arms and the other enchantment.
ossification.
Ossifications, yeah, sorry. I don't think that is I mean, if they want to give again monocolor deck power, they need to print this type of answers for all the colors. For example, I'm not a big fan of green decks, but mono green is not available anyway. It hasn't any way of protection for your creature. I mean, you have Tybars and that things, but that type of protection doesn't protect you from sacrificing your cards. And black has a ton of sacrificing mechanics. I mean, mono white did get a boost this set, but we are on mono red. But I mean, mono green is not getting anything really in terms of, yeah, they have good cards and fun cards, but they're not viable because any creature that you put into play is going to be killed by white or black or by red or countered by blue. So I don't think they are making the monocolors very well. It has to be a little more balanced. Now that they are keeping like 3 years, the current the standard. I think Wizards of the Coast needs to stop printing in every set a 2-mana counter and a 2-mana removal. Because I mean there's too much already for any creature cards to any creature deck to you have to, if you go against a black deck, you know that your creatures are gonna be killed the moment they enter the battlefield. That's what I'm going to say. Sure.
Okay. Would you would you say the same though for 1 mana like black removal? I don't know. Cut downs. It could be an impressive card, but it didn't turn out to be like nobody playing cut down and explorer, right?
Well, so Cutdown's not playing Explorer, but the reason why it's not is because Fatal Push is the best black removal spell printed in like the last like 15, 20 years. But like the answer or the question of why aggro is not a thing is because and I know Darkstream remembers this. Remember how sticky and annoying Troll Aesthetic was? Like that you couldn't kill it. Like that card cost 3 mana. It basically had hexproof and it regenerated. Like you could not kill this card. That's what
Yeah.
aggro needs right now. Is they don't have sticky threats that draw you cards or any of that. Black has the best removal, which it should, and white should have exile removal, which it should, and red should have very, very good damage removal, which they all have that. What green doesn't have, their best creature costs 5 mana, and that's
Agreed.
and it's 5 mana. That creature should cost like 3, or they should have a 2 or 3 mana card that has hexproof, or something that continuously draws them cards, because that's basically what green doesn't have. Is the best creature. The best creature in the format is red, and the best removal spells are in black. So, and all the other 3-drops, what 3-drop in green does what Wedding Announcement or Fable or Graveyard Trespasser should have been green, because that's basically what that card does. It has, virtual hexproof. It deals with the graveyard like Scavenging Ooze does. Like, I'm not saying that black shouldn't get something like, but that's like a green card.
I think you're right about that. Now that I think about it,
But like green doesn't have a 3-drop that basically does that outside of Glissa. But again, it's black. So I'm hoping that Wilds brings that type of stuff, but that's basically what aggro doesn't have. Aggro doesn't have sticky threats. So
let's shift over and talk about the meta. And I'm using the data from MTG Assistant over the last 7 days in terms of how often the deck gets play. And of course, this is right. All of these is the caveat that this is people who voluntarily use the same app and upload their data. So, of course, this isn't a full picture, which is why we have to talk about what we're playing against as well on top of this. But looking at just like their top 10 decks, 1 is Grixis midrange, 2 is Rakdos, 3 is Esper Legends, 4 is Mono White Control, 5 is Mono Red, 6 is Mono Blue, 7 and 8 are 2 different 5-color piles. Then there's another Mono Red deck, Azorius Soldiers, and the bottom of the list is Mono Black midrange at 2% of the meta. Top of the list, Grixis is at 11.6. And all of these claim to have between 55 and 59% average win rates. And we can talk about like the particulars of what the most average cards are in each, especially when it comes to the Fable situation. But off the top of my head, like I only see Fable the Mirrorbreaker in the top 2 lists here. What are your takes? I'll ask John Ramos first.
I don't really play standard that often, but I did watch the PT, and Fable was in just over 60% of all decks played. And I mean, if you ban Fable, there's gonna be something else that takes its spot, and that's gonna be 60% of the meta. So this is the most healthy, and I use healthy loosely, that standard has been in a very long time, where you can take, mono white Orzhov that Autumn Burchett brought, or Rakdos Breach, which the CFB team brought, or another Fable deck, or you could play 5-color with a bunch of other stuff, and you still have Esper Legends that doesn't play Fable at all. So you got options. The issue is you need to respect, and this is one of the things that I see, especially on Arena, where the average player today is not the same player that was playing in paper, where you have to respect the meta. Like, you just have to. And if you don't, you can't just throw your hands up and yell at the clouds like us old men do and, complain that you're not winning anything. Well, Shieldred, you got to kill these cards. I got nothing for you. Like, you have to respect them.
I think it just depends on right, two different metas, ladder versus tournament. I think that's one big thing, because on
Yes.
ladder, Fable's not as present. Here's my big question though: is those top two decks we're talking about here on this list that use Fable? If you take Fable out of the equation, are those two decks still at the top? Darkstream, what do you think?
I don't think they would be. No. Fable is kind of a fix-all for a lot of things, and the filtering is a very important part of what it provides. I mean, the acceleration's great, the backside's great, but that second mode is so underrated. The ability to have, because of Fable, a number of useless one-ofs in your main where they're bombs against certain matchups, but they aren't very good against the rest of the meta. You don't have to care because you have blood tokens and you have Fables. So you have 8 different ways to just cycle through, and in deck building, that really frees you up as a mid-range player to play very specific answers in your main and essentially gain an extra 2 to 3 sideboard slots by doing that. And I know that's not something a lot of people think about, but that's the side effect of Fable. So without Fable, do I think they're on top? No, I think they're still very good tier 1 decks, but it will shift dramatically what they can do.
Fable is so good, man. Like, think of how good it is, and then imagine the better player being able to have card selection and card filtering and being able to sculpt your hand. It is so awesome to just be like, I remember, and this is sort of an aside, but it sort of does the same thing. Seth Manfield had a mulligan from 7 to 6, and his hand was 6 lands and a Bone Crusher Giant, and he's like, snap keep, because he's got 2 plays, turn 2 and turn 3. And that's basically what Fable does. I play it on 3, and if I have 9 billion lands in my hand, I can draw 2. I pitch 2 lands that I was never going to play anyway, and now they're 2 spells. That's how good that card is. Oh, and by the way, it's a creature. 2 creatures. Oh, and it accelerates me. The card does everything. It's sort of like when Uro was in the format. Not as powerful, obviously, but it's basically just that. It does everything you want in one card. If
Yeah.
there is a card that needs to go, like if it just gets too ubiquitous, that's the card that needs to go, because it's easy to cast. If it was 2 red and a colorless, I really do think that it would be really, really difficult to play for every card or for every deck. But as it stands now, the card is super easy to cast, and if it was gone, Rakdos mid-range would not be a thing. It would have to be Grixis.
Yeah, okay. It would be Grixis without Fable, just using like Corpse Appraiser and Graveyard Trespasser instead.
And like Wandering Minds and stuff, because you have to still be able to 2 for 1.
Wandering Mind would be the one that you would use to try to get Invoke to happen. But you don't get the treasure token, so I don't know. I don't know. If that one turn change, is that enough for something like Esper Legends or Mono White to dominate the meta then? What do you think?
That's just how good Fable is, but I'll let the others answer.
I honestly think if you wanted, and again, I don't love alchemy, everybody knows that, but if you wanted to fix Fable for alchemy, you change it from treasure token to blood token, or food token. Doesn't matter, just something that doesn't ramp. And I think it becomes an infinitely fairer card when you can kind of ignore the front half of it.
I think it's just
Yeah.
lose the token. It doesn't get anything.
Sure, and that's fine too. But as it stands, yeah, Fable is an engine card that's going to be the dynamic of this format as long as it is alive and well. And I don't have an opinion on whether, again, we're getting back to the ban, but like I don't have an opinion one way or another, because either you ban Fable, in which case ban a bunch of other engines so that we're not just next man up, like let's actually completely alter the meta, shift it, and shake it up. Or let's just assume that Fable is that good and you have to prepare accordingly. And for those wondering why Grixis is like already at the top over Rakdos within a week of the Pro Tour, with Rakdos absolutely crushing the Pro Tour, part of that is because of Fable. and the fact that Grixis gets blue mana to play cards like Make Disappear, which breaks serve against Fable. That's literally the reason you're playing that counter more than any other, is that when they play Fable on 3, you have Make Disappear on 2. So on the draw, you're still able to keep up in the mirror.
I'm gonna put up for the folks at home the current list that is at the top. The average, the big average list for Grixis, and yeah, 4 copies of Fable, 4 Corpse Bracers, 3 Maestro's Charm. That's interesting to go with the 2 Chandras, I guess. 1 of the Hidetsugu and Kairis, full set of Invoke Despairs, 2 Sheldreds, 2 Sheldred's Edict, 2 Tainted Indulgence. That's a card I actually haven't seen in a while. 26 lands, incomplete sideboard, but yeah, those are your very typical Liliana, I understand. Sort of once in future in the sideboard. That's interesting.
Darkstream actually reminded me of my second point, which was when they banned cards way back when. They did that with the idea that the next deck up was going to be something. So when they ban, the most recent example was, oh god, I'm gonna lose this. So when they banned Emrakul, they banned Reflector Mage and something else. But it was basically knocking all 3 decks off the pedestal, and they used to do that in anticipation. And when they were earlier when you were talking about the rock paper scissors meta, and seeing it all go wrong, the perfect case of watching that go crazy, like perfect storm wrong, was during the Oko days. When they banned Field, that's basically Field was the reason why Oko wasn't a big deal. Like, it was good, but Field basically was like, you can't beat all of these tokens. And the way you beat Field was with Questing Beast. So that was the rock paper scissors meta. Once they banned Fable, they had to ban everything else, because it had to start, because they didn't ban Oko when they banned Field, and then Oko took over as the 70%, and then they had to ban Oko, and then all you had was Embercleave, Questing Beast, and some other stuff. But that was basically the rock paper scissors meta gone bad when you only banned one thing and not in anticipation of everything else. That was the second point I forgot.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you for that. Looking at the stats here, meta breakdown, what cards are in the deck. 98% of the decks playing Grixis have Fable the Mirror Breaker in full set. So yeah,
And
of course.
and I can tell you 2% of them are wrong.
Exactly. 1 copy and 2% of them have Ob Nixilis. I wonder if that's that's the 2% right there. They're playing Ob.
They're
Yeah,
wrong too.
They're wrong as well. Yep.
I like this stat line though. 1 copy and 22% for Chandra Hope's Beacon. People are coming around to that card.
They should be. The card is extremely powerful. It is better than the top end that other people are trying. And this goes back to the Pro Tour with Reed Duke being featured with that Rakdos Breach deck. Everybody wants Atali and Breach the Multiverse to be the best thing to do to go over the top of the other Rakdos decks. To me, if those are getting played heavily, we have an inbred meta issue, because that shouldn't be like 7 mana sorcery speed spells shouldn't be the backbreaking bone of any fucking format in Magic. The fact that Chandra is as good as she is at 6 is probably where we should be at the top end of the curve. Atali, Breach, those should just be getting countered pretty much every time.
Yeah,
Chandra is so good.
yeah, we got to talk about 3 disdainful strokes in the sideboard just being standard thing right now in most decks if you can run them.
The meta breakdown also suggests and upholds the argument that Breach and Atali are not the best thing to be doing in Rakdos.
Yeah, 1 copy of Atali and 4% of the list. And for Breach, you've got at the very bottom 1 copy and 2% of the list for Breach.
I'll put it this way, Max. What I don't want to do is pay 7 mana and guess about what is about to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
that
like,
guess is that guess is bad.
It reminds me
Right.
of my favorite pet deck, the Garuda deck from Ikoria. Like it's like playing slot machines.
Exactly. Exactly.
God, was
I,
that deck annoying?
there's one variance card that I actually have gotten behind in all this time, and that's Collected Company. And basically everything else to me has been underpowered to the point that I don't want to risk it. Like Atali, I watched on the Pro Tour when Atali hit like double duress, and it was just, oh, well, I guess they'll just go for the throat in response, and nothing else mattered. They top deck and invoke, and that's the game. Okay, like it didn't matter, and that's a problem when your 7 mana spell doesn't win you the game. That's a problem. So I wouldn't go up that far. That's why I like the fact that Destroyer's List took it all down on Chandra, because Chandra is that strong, and Chandra gets you to the other side of the matchup of like literally. I played the hell out of this Grixis mid versus Rakdos in the Pizza Box tournament a couple weeks ago, and I can tell you that Chandra and Razorlash Transmogrant were the two most impactful cards in that matchup. That was it.
Yeah, Breach and Atatli are not Emergent Ultimatum.
Yeah, that's what everything's trying to be is Emergent Ultimatum. I remember there was a 7-drop in green that's still in standard, but nobody plays it. It's a Saga that lets you like cast permanents, like 2 permanents for free or whatever, and nobody plays with
The
that.
world's
the
the
world
world spell. It's
world
terrible.
spell, yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Razorlash Transmogrant, 1 copy in 2% of the list. So it is up there. I think a lot of people are still on this Blade Coil Serpent for value. But yeah, it's interesting to talk about what the top end should be. I thought when Atraxa was the top end, at least with Atraxa, you get a bunch of cards from your deck if they just, kill it. So I feel like that should have been the top end, really, for a while. And it was for a while there.
Yeah, Atraxa made a lot of sense because it's usually a draw 4 or draw 5. So you're getting like a 5-for-1. And then when you're battling mid-range v mid-range, 5-for-1s are absurd.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. Let me get off of talking about Grixis. What are y'all playing right now? If you're playing, and we can make room for the Explorer discussion as well, if it's shifted at all since Aftermath. But what's everybody playing right now? If you're trying to, and we're just talking about ladder, not trying to prepare for a tournament or any kind of tournament meta. What are we playing on ladder? We want to get to Mythic.
Y'all standard players can go first, but if I was playing standard right now, I would be playing Chandra with invokes until somebody convinced me that it's worth. Or I'm sorry, if you're a Spike and you love red black stuff, play the Stoyer list. If you're me and you love off the wall stuff, play the 5-color ramp deck that Olsen took to the top 4. The deck's actually very good.
Luis Dragon, what are you playing right now? Or Watts? Either one of y'all. What are y'all playing? I know what Watts is playing.
Oh yeah? You know what I'm playing? What am I playing?
I could see it.
Oh, okay. I
What
didn't know
is
you
what
pulled
is
up my
this
screen. Yeah.
pile?
But so like this is the beginnings of a list that I want to mess around with. So this isn't what I'm playing on ladder right now. This is actually in the play queue. I know. Yeah. Shit.
Are
Should
you
be playing around.
are you still on enchantments?
Yeah, I'm still doing Selesnya enchantments. It performs all right. It's not. I'd say it's probably like high 50s, but not above 60. Probably not even close to 60, really. But I'm actually going to burn myself here just to produce a mana, and also to increase her loyalty. And then we'll add 2 mana of any color. Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
We just put you on the spotlight. Sorry. Oh man, I am personally I'm playing a couple of different things, but I just had to transition over from Esper Legends. Esper Legends had me like at 70% for a long time. And I'm experimenting with a couple of different piles here, but I've been trying to make heads or tails of this Grixis list and what would be the perfect version of it. And so far I've settled on one Chandra at the top end with one Breach the Multiverse in the sideboard. And that's it. That's the top of the deck. Ton of 2-drop, like typical stuff, like your 2 Abrades. Everybody's still running Bankbuster, I think. So Abrade in the main board, that kind of thing. Darkstream.
Sorry.
Darkstream, you go ahead, Luis.
Sorry, I had my microphone mute. And I was looking. Sorry. No, this week I didn't play much, but I will try to play with Esper Legends, and we'll try to make the Nahiri artifact deck. Hey, maybe I can make it work, like something, good project.
Darkstream, what are you playing right now? Is it the Abzan Legends?
I mean, it really depends, but I'm 11-2 with Abzan Legends, and that's where I'm at for the moment because I think it is the best Shieldred deck. There are a lot of ways to define what you're trying to do in Standard right now, but if I'm not going to be reliant on Fable, I want to play the best Shieldred deck, which used to be Esper Legends in a way. But what I like about Abzan is that it plays 4x of the Malira, the Living Cure. So between Skrelv, Malira, and Plaza of Heroes, you are making it extremely difficult for them to get rid of the card that they absolutely have to get rid of within a few turns, or else it wins the game pretty much every time. And to add to that, you're running a density of threats that also have to be answered very low on the curve, with Glissa Sunslayer being one of them, Adeline snowballing, so therefore being one of them, and Thalia often time walking and forcing removal out just to deal with that effect. So I really like where this Abzan Legends list is positioned. There's a lot of people, like we were talking about this a little bit earlier, before I got too like deep in the ramblings, and we had to run it back. But Razor Lash Transmogrant, I think it's time in the meta, given the density of Grixis midrange and Rakdos midrange, to admit that Razor Lash might deserve main board slots.
I was gonna ask you about that specifically, but you're getting to it now. Go ahead.
I think, okay, it was easy for me to slot it into the main of Abzan Legends because there's a lack of 2-mana legends in those color pairings. We don't get Denick, we don't get Rona. There's a slot there that needs to be filled by something. And Razor Lash Transmogrant was a pretty easy call because there weren't better options. But once I started playing with it in the main, it was really, really fun to watch how many frustrating situations occurred for Rakdos players and Grixis players because they can't get rid of it. Go for the throats don't work. Cut downs only work for a moment. And now they're wasting time and resources while you're also somewhat invoke proofing your board position as the game goes on. And it's just very difficult for them. And that's the point, is whatever you're playing needs to be Grixis and needs to be Rakdos. So I think it's worth considering these Razor Lash Transmogrants in the main of even Esper Legends based on how well they've done for me in Abzan Legends.
All right, so tip of the week from you is going all in on Razor Lash Transmogrant, considering the Grixis Rakdos meta.
Yep, absolutely.
Hell yeah. And I still see you running the 3 Laurens in the sideboard. You got 2 Surge of Salvations, 4 cut downs. Are we going to see a sideboard guide on this one pretty soon, maybe?
I may have prepped 3 sideboard guides for tomorrow.
Holy moly. Well, you heard it here, folks, first.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I'm really enjoying trying to brew with this meta because Rakdos and Grixis are everywhere, and they are the de facto best decks in the format right now. And what I mean when I say that is that they can be adjusted to beat any one deck in the format. Like if you are playing Grixis and you want to beat Domain, you can just shift 8 card slots in your main board and you will beat the shit out of Domain every time. Like imagine a Domain player going up against main board 3 negate 4 disdainful stroke on a Grixis deck. Good luck. You're not getting shit through that wall, which means that they can just sit back and play Protect the Shieldred and wait till they just invoke you out. That's what I mean when I say it's time to consider main board hate for like Grixis and Rakdos, because they can choose to hate out any deck in the format, but they cannot currently hate out all of the decks in the format. They have to pick their battles. They only have so many slots. So we're trying to play off meta slightly to force the issue where they don't have enough slots to effectively counter what we're doing, without giving up too many slots to the mirror match and to other archetypes.
That makes sense. I like the 1 AO at the top. You think the 1 AO is still significant enough to warrant that main board slot?
I do. The fact of the matter is we're playing the best Shelly deck, and sometimes you don't draw Shieldred, but you draw AO, and they have to kill AO, and it gives you a Shieldred. So I think of it as the 5th Shieldred in many instances.
That does make a lot of sense. I like that. Okay, cool. Well, all right. Those are the decks that we're playing right now. If you're somebody who is struggling in Standard, I just recommend that you take a look at what you're running up against and consider your choices based on that. I think in summation, my personal summation of the Standard meta right now is rock paper scissors. Still, I know we're seeing a lot of dominance from Rakdos, Grixis. Some people are saying those decks are just slight variations on each other. But I think there's significant enough changes. The counter spells in Grixis, for example, countering a lot of what the other decks are doing. In particular, your Reanimator lists, still running off of Cruelty of Gix, things of that nature, the domain lists. Grixis is just really well positioned, in my opinion. So be the bad guy, run that list. If not, run something that outvalues it. And I still think the Legends decks are very capable of doing that. I still run Esper Legends. I'd be willing to try Abzan Legends. So, any tips for the folks at home out there, you guys struggling on ladder? Explorer or Standard, actually. John Ramos, I forgot to ask you, what are you running right now in Explorer?
So we're live. I'm doing a tier 1, or I'm doing a different type of content at the moment. So I'm going through all of the tier 1 decks, and when I say tier 1, I mean the popular decks in the format of Pioneer and Explorer. Not so much the best decks in the format, because there's really only like 3 or 4 that are just like far and away the better decks, best decks of the format.
Very
Them
much
being
agree. Yeah.
Rakdos mid-range, Mono Green, Blue Eye Control, and you don't see Greasefang too often, but it's up there because you have to respect it. If you don't have enough sideboard slots to deal with it, you're just gonna die on turn 3, turn 4. So I'm going through all the decks, and it also forces me to play decks that I don't like. And I started with Sacrifice because I think one of the best cards in the Aftermath set is the new Ob Nixilis. I don't know if I had it in my top 5 or not. I don't remember, to be honest. But Ob Nixilis it's not Corvold, but I think it's better suited in Pioneer Explorer than Standard, and that's because you have Cat Oven. And Cat Oven and Mayhem Devil allow you to draw a bunch of cards. And the list I'm running is a combination of research from a Shizzle, Samsoni, and a bunch of 5.0 and challenges from Pioneer on Goldfish and many others. And I came up with I'm 9-3 overall. I went 6-1 yesterday live, and like the 6 wins it was like not even close. I guess one of the wins were kind of close, but my loss was to Angels, which is a difficult matchup to begin with. But Omnixilis is as good as it is advertised. As I said, it's not Corvold, but it's pretty close. And while you don't get the initial burst in the turn that you play Corvold, because you have to play the cards the turn that you get them, except if it's on the opponent's turn. And the new Omnixilis is just that it's a 4/3, 2 colorless, 1 black, 1 red legendary creature demon flying trample. When one or more opponents lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Omnixilis, and exile the top card of your library until your next end step, which is if you play it on the same turn. Until your next end step, you may play that card. So what you're doing is you're waiting until your opponent's turn, and then doing a bunch of sacrifice stuff, and then you get all the cards. So it says virtually drawing all of them. This also combos very well with all will be one in standard. Good luck trying to figure out how to combo with that. Because once you deal 1 damage, you put a counter, it deals a damage, and it's an infinite combo and it kills you. I don't think it's good enough in Explorer, but Explorer hasn't changed. I think Sacrifice, the problem that Sacrifice had was it didn't have a burst, which Corvold gave you, and your best cards were Mayhem Devil and Fable. And now that you have Omnixilus, you basically have a way to leverage 3 or 4 cards at once. And there have been games where we're just out of resources. I draw Omnixilus, and then I had an opponent casualties award me twice, and I drew out of it just with Omnixilus alone. So
Oh wow.
yeah, like it doesn't matter. And Omnixilus basically solves a lot of the problems that you have. Not all of them, but you get the burst of card advantage that you need.
Yeah, that's really what the deck was missing in some ways.
Yeah, I started at 3. This is the new iteration. I'm down to 2. Because the variant that I was running before had, so like you see these variants that are running, like I've played the deck, I've played Sacrifice before. I think collectively in like the last like 3 months, maybe 2, I have like over 50 matches with the deck, so I sort of understand how the deck works. But the thing that I didn't understand is the majority of the players are playing like they're playing a bunch of 3-ofs, like 3 Fatal Push, 3 Cauldron Familiars, 3 Claim the Firstborns, or sometimes 3 Witches Ovens, and it's just like, no, just play 4 of these.
I don't
Like they're
understand
playing
that.
like so they're like, oh well, we're playing like 1 Annihilating Glare, and we're playing like 1 of whatever. And I'm just like, those cards are too slow. You have to kill them. This deck does not, Sacrifice does not. You can't take forever. You're nickel and diming them until you find the burst. The burst is, do you draw Omnixilus or did you draw Mayhem Devil? If you don't draw either of those cards, you have to hope that you just control the game long enough to kill them with Cat Oven. But Explorer and Pioneer are so fast that you have to have them. So the I need to kill like 1 planeswalker or 1 creature. You don't have time for that. You have to find your stuff and kill them. You don't have time to mess around. So that's why I'm on like a bunch of 4-ofs. And I was at 3 Omnixilus. I'm down to 2. I might go back up to 3 and like cut like Croxa. I think Croxa, the only reason I still have it in here is because it was stock. And I probably will find a way to put it in the sideboard, because the only reason why I even keep it in here is because Rogues is popular, and I want them to cry when they flip it over after they milled like 6 cards.
Yeah, it's perfect for rogues.
But other than that, it's not good against Rakdos. It's not good against Mono Green. It's only good against Blue White, which is not very popular at the moment. So I might just cut it or put it in the sideboard. But that's basically Explorer. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you just a meta question about Explorer. I know Rogues was coming back into fashion. How is that deck positioned? Did it fall out, or was it flash in the pan? What's going on with Rogues?
Rogues is a good deck. I think the consensus is there's not a good consensus on what the good decks are or what the good variants are. So like, for example, there are variants that play they're playing more creatures. So like they're playing like 1 Zareth, they're playing a couple of Brazen Borrowers and whatever. And I think Brazen Borrower is actively wrong, because you're not really bouncing anything. What are you going to bounce? A Graveyard Trespasser? Good luck. So I think the variants that are running a lot more Nighthawk Scavengers and are playing more flashy creatures, a lot of the lists are playing Kaidos. If they're playing Kaidos, it's because they're playing Shieldreds. And if you're playing Zareths, which some of the variants are, you're playing Kaidos. If you're not playing Zareth, there's virtually no reason to play Kaido. I think I would lean on Jace more. But it really depends on the list, because Rogues is one of those decks that there isn't really a consensus except the core. And the core is 4 push, 4 Thieves Guild Enforcer, 4 Fairy Mastermind, 2 Shieldreds, 4 Soaring Thought Thief, 4 Drown in the Lock.
Yeah, I would
And
agree.
that's
That's
your
the core.
core.
Yeah, that's definitely the core of the deck
Now
right there.
the rest of the cards are you facing more graveyard strategies? Then you're probably playing Cling to Dust over Spell Pierce in the main. Are you playing against more creature decks than Blue White Control? Then you're probably playing more Nighthawk Scavengers than you are playing Brazen Borrowers. If you're playing with Zerets because you're killing a lot more things than usual, then you're playing with Kaidos over Jace. And then Shieldred is really depending on how many creatures you're playing. If you're not playing Zereth and you're not playing Brazen Borrowers, you can get away with playing more Shieldreds, but it really depends on what your meta is and what you're seeing, and really depends on how you're going to build your deck. The times that I've played Rogues, if you play it correctly, it rewards you for tight play, and it has a good matchup against Mono Green and a lot of the slower decks, because the deck demands that you interact with it. Because if you don't, it just nickel and dimes you and kills you out of nowhere, where it just goes thought thief, kill you.
Interesting.
So, but the deck is good. I don't know. This is actually Rakdos and Rogues are on my list. They're not up for a bit because the next deck after Sacrifice is going to be Atraxa Creativity. But those decks, Rogues and Rakdos, are going to be in my wheelhouse to give a 25 to 50 matches to really see, especially Rogues, like what the best variant is. Because right now I don't know, and I don't think the community knows either because the meta is so shifty, especially on Arena.
Agreed. Agreed. All right, let's wrap up our final segment here. Let's talk about really briefly, if we can, how we feel about the Aftermath cards. Two big things to pay attention to. One, what are you playing against? Are you noticing Aftermath in any of the stuff that you're playing against? Two, are you using Aftermath cards? Are they effective? Are there any of note? And I guess another thing to add would be how impactful have they been to either standard or explorer meta? I'll start with Luis Dragon. Luis Dragon, how do you feel about Aftermath overall? And, you can answer any of those questions that you like.
I think it's a very fun expansion, well, a very fun set after all, but I wish it will have, I mean, it's just came out, but I wish it will have already seen like a more important switch on the meta. I haven't seen much of the new cards being played.
Okay. Yeah, I suspect that's going to be what a lot of us say. Lieutenant Watts, I really want your take. Are you seeing a lot of these cards get play? Are you using any of them? Are they impacting the meta shift?
Think that any of them are going to be like huge meta shifters. Like, I'm not seeing them being played that much. I'm seeing a few of them. I'm playing a few of them myself, especially in this experimental red deck that I was playing with earlier. But I think that that's mainly what we're going to see out of them, is that there are a few interesting cards that people are going to try to slot in here and there, but I don't think that it's going to be as shifting as a full set normally is.
That makes sense. I have been seeing some adjustments, but that's because I like to play with specific decks. I play favorites. I've slotted some things into soldiers. Coppercoat Vanguard was the most recent change to that deck, and then um, looking at some other stuff. But really, the biggest change was to Esper Legends. I'm trying to play with that really odd blue-white Thopter. I forget the name. The Thopterix, I think. I'm running 2 copies right now. It is having an effect on the board state, but I just don't know if I should just be running
Are you
something
talking about,
else.
hold on here, let me share my screen again.
Yeah.
Are you talking about this card right here?
No, that's PNLR.
Oh, okay. Which one were you talking
It's
about?
not even a legend. It's a white blue flyer. There it is. The 4th card right there. Yeah. The Thopterix.
Oh, but that's really cool.
Yeah, you would think. I think it's pretty cool too. I just don't know if the win rate of my plays. I'll have to play like 20, 30 games with it to see, really.
Yeah.
Other than those slight changes, I'm not really playing with too many of the new cards. Legends decks are probably seeing some impact. There were a lot of those in this set, right? Um, but nothing that I'm like if I'm trying to make it to Mythic, I'm not slotting too many things into the decks that I'm playing. I'm just kind of playing what I've been playing for the past month. I don't know. It's been low impact for me as well. Darkstream, what do you think? You've been brewing a lot lately. I know this set, at the very least, has inspired you to do some brews. We had a really fun streamer showdown with the new cards. What's your take on Aftermath overall?
I believe the Ob Nixilis is very important for Explorer, and otherwise, this set has not a whole lot of things that are going to fit in anywhere in particular. The Gold Forged Thoptrix you were talking about, I tried. If it had slightly different stats, that card would have been amazing. Like if it was a 2/2 instead of a 1/3, I'd be playing 4 of them. If it was a 3/1, I would be playing 4 of them and wishing I could play 8 of them. But because it's a 1/3, it's holding it back. The only card I know of that's really impactful in Standard right now was the printing of Blot Out, which is an uncommon from Aftermath that exiles.
Yeah, I've been slotting a couple of those in the sideboard. Do you think those are main board worthy in like Grixis and Rakdos? What do you think?
No.
I think I think it deserves merit. I think it deserves consideration because we are getting to a point where you're going to see inbred metas with Rakdos and V Rakdos. Therefore, Razor Lash Transmogrants become important to remove. Answers for Chandra become important, and the question of whether or not you actually need Forgo for the Throat or if you can do a 3/1 split with a Blot Out main is something that I definitely consider.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, other than those cards, I don't think there's anything else of note, really, right, for the set, which is really weird because it really got me thinking about brewing at the very least. But I just, when it comes to main play, I'm not leaning on anything right now that just came out. Did we just get Turtlebox? Turtlebox is in here.
I'll have you know.
We're getting raided. Oh man. All right. Well,
What are you going to tell us today, Turtlebox?
I don't think Blotout's mainboardable, but it's definitely like a 2 of or 3 of in the sideboard. I'm running 1 of right now in the sideboard of Rakdos, mid-range, and 2 of in the sideboard of Grixis, and that's it. I don't have any data or anything. I just think it's an okay card. I don't think it's any better or worse than Soul Transfer. It probably will be better than Soul Transfer in like 2 or 3 weeks because the modal options on Soul Transfer are not really good. I would rather have what Soul Transfer does at instant speed, and that's it.
Cool.
That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Turtlebox,
everybody.
YouTube content creator ever
Of all time.
Just graced our podcast. And that's it. That's a wrap. That's all we have for you today. Go check us out now on Spotify and YouTube for the video version there. Thank you to everybody who participated today. We have I'm gonna throw the credit to Turtlebox for that last minute intercession there.
Pew, pew.
Shout out to Turtlebox. Go check out their content. We had Darth Rictus of the Dark Stream, John Ramos MTG, Louis Dragon, Lieutenant Watts, and myself, Max Damage on 9s, representing the MTG Rebellion. Go check us out on YouTube, MTG Rebellion. Links in the chat. And that's it, everybody. Don't forget, untap, upkeep, resist.
resist.
Peace out, everybody.